Well, I'm very pleased to be here. This is an exciting topic. We've heard about deliveries of pizza by drones for a lot of years. I don't think too many of us have experienced it yet. So is that a success or a failure of the drone business? Or are drones really supposed to deliver other services to us? Is the problem the cost? Is it not good enough drones? Is it too complex? Is it lack of regulations? Are consumers too reluctant about this? Or do we just have a business community that doesn't see the potential that drones have? I think there's a lot of different factors going into why do we see what works and why don't work. And we have a really good panel here with a lot of different players from the Norwegian side of this, and also a few experts from the US that can help shed light on what's the potential and what do we have to do to see the success. At the same time, I must say that I've now lived in Alabama for about a year. I hardly ever see any drones in the air. Maybe that's a good thing because it means that they are becoming a lot more silent and you really don't notice it. But we also have a tendency in Norway to, as soon as one other city in the world has something that matches what we are doing, we feel we're lagging behind. My point of view is that we're still up on at least the top 10%, maybe top 5% on a lot of things we're doing. We shouldn't worry too much, but at the same time, if we think that, well, because we're ahead now, we're also going to be ahead in 10 years, that's not going to be the case. So having the players do the discussions and making sure that everybody from the Luftfartstilsynet to the UAS organization and everybody else see how can we still keep up, how can we still be the most interesting place to do business and develop technology. I hope we have achieved something. I'm not going to reintroduce everybody, but I'm going to start with Posten and Ruter. Both of you deliver goods today, some in package form and some in more flesh form. Maybe Posten would be the one that's kind of closest to being able to deliver something where consumers feel that they are not at risk when this is happening. Where are you at this point in time?
Well, thank you. I think that we've spent quite a lot of time on understanding the ecosystem, really, to identify what are the different components that it will take to make an ecosystem for drone delivery. And it is, as you say, quite complex, because it's not just about the drone, it's about a lot of different factors, really. So we need a functional landing and takeoff facility. We need a drone with the right technology in terms of payload and range and all weather capabilities, autonomy and things like this. And we need the controlling systems, be that UTM or other things, and maybe even an integration system for all of these drone as a service providers. We think that we would need if we were to launch a system like this. And then secondly, I think that we're not replacing a helicopter like the police department here. So what we are, if we are to introduce drones in our operation, what we basically are replacing is a man with a vehicle. So it's a fairly low-cost alternative, right? So our drone operation would have to be cost-efficient as well. So that's also identifying where are these use cases where we can combine the current state really and make it fly. So that's what we're spending our time on at the moment.
Right. Thank you. Bon?
Well, I used to work for the Post. As I came from an industry that treated trying to treat parcels as people, to an industry that treat people as parcels. So it's not that it's not that different. But well, I think it's two things. I think the drones by themselves, there might be some things left to develop, but basically I think the technology are more or less there. So then it's like the Post says, it's the infrastructure around it, you know, that has to be developed. Now it's sort of, you can see there are enthusiasts flying sushi with drones, but you know, that's, you know, hook a pack of sushi under the drone and fly to somebody you know, basically that's, but you need a lot more that to do this commercially. Then I also think it needs to be somebody that really wants this product. You know, you need to work closely with the customers to see what kind of service is this exactly. Are you willing to pay more for this? Is what you get for your money when you get it, you know, flown in by drone after doing it twice and impressed your neighbor? What then? You know, what is this product? And I think when you get to that, you also have to spread the word. You actually have to start developing. You actually have to start with small steps and encourage people to try more and really get the competence and knowledge about drone technology up in the industry, because enthusiasts can take this to a certain level, but after that you need something more.
Before we go to Børre from Airlift, because Airlift, they are kind of provider of services with helicopters to start with, but now also drones. But from Posten and Ruter's perspective, you don't deal with aviation in everyday terms, and also when you talk about autonomous vehicles, you have a lot of postal people or bus drivers that will feel that, hey, this is endangering my job. It's not a good thing for me personally. How do you get your people to kind of cooperate on this, or do you feel that you have to move to the future on a slow speed to make sure that your companies kind of stick together moving there?
Yeah. From a postal perspective, I can say that the biggest fright for our employees is not technology in itself. It's actually substitution, digitization of the society. So letters go away, really. We have had a 70% volume decline since 1999, and we're having a decline of 12-13% every year. So that's the threat of the postman. It's not the technology. So technology is one way of staying competitive in the future as well, just for the relevant use cases, really.
Yeah, well, when you start with something new, you almost always have some new experiences. So we had one first, actually, to qualify drivers to drive autonomous bus. We actually have the first driver that failed the driver's test for an autonomous bus. You know, that should be impossible, but it's hard to find people that actually both have a bus license, the license to drive a bus, and also are very good at Fortnite. You know, they're so to make sure that you had enough qualified drivers to sit in the bus that was basically there to stop the bus, you had to find people that had both a qualified bus driver's license and were good at Fortnite, because they had to drive the bus with the controller. And because they did not exist, we had to take the seats out of the bus, because it then under the restriction of, and you know, could treat it as a normal vehicle. You know, that's also the thing you have to do to handle regulation, to try to handle disruption. But what we've done is actually started a new project where we offer digital course training to the bus drivers in cooperation with Digital Norway, because then I think we could first build the competence with them so they can understand the technology, because it's not going to happen like this. It's going to be a ride. You're going to need bus drivers for maybe decades, but we don't know. So how do we recruit them now? By competence, digital competence as a part of the package. Then we get more competent bus drivers. Our operators get more competent bus drivers, and they get more insight into this transition and feel safer, and they're better qualified for whatever job they're going to take afterwards. So working with the people that's going to be part of this transition, giving them competence, I think is vital, both to make it a good transition and to take care of the value of the workers.
Børre from Airlift, traditionally a helicopter company located on the west part of Norway, but a year ago, in a few days, a year ago exactly, you put out drones to be a separate entity in your company. Is it going to be the main thing in the future, or is still helicopter going to be the big thing for you guys?
Well, yes, we think that the drone industry will take over for the helicopters in the future. We have established a new entity, Airlift Solutions, that is primary focus to have focus on new technology. And this is the company I represent today. We think that the three major factors that need to be in place to establish a new service, and that is public acceptance for a new technology. We need to understand the customer needs to get our competitive solutions. and also work along with the technical solutions with the drone makers, UAV makers, to have a complete turnkey solution that is usable and beneficial for the community.
But you managed to keep your company to be an aviation company, or do you see a big difference between the helicopter pilots and the drone operators?
Well, in the future there will be working hand in hand, more or less. There will be a transition period. We think that drones will start in a small scale and then escalate. We see this in the power line industry, inspection of power lines. Last week we won a competition for inspecting power lines and so on. And our goal is to start with a drone for a small scale and then build up step by step. And the same we will do for the logistic part. We will find small scale areas that are operational safe and with a, let's say, low starting point, and then build step by step.
Ole Henrik, representing Grønn Kontakt or Green Contact. You're kind of looking more on how do you get the systems to work from an infrastructure perspective, probably more background with electric cars and things like that, but where's drones in this picture, and how do you look at the potential?
Excellent question. So I run a company which charges cars, and that's in this country a full-time job, maybe not so much in Alabama yet. But I usually get requests for all sorts of conferences where someone wants to charge something, boats or buses or trucks or planes or whatever. And we usually just say no, because we are busy charging cars, and that's a full-time job. But whoever called me up for this thing was extremely persuasive. So I said yes, based on the premise that I don't know anything about charging drones at all. So it's an interesting panel to be part of. But when you start to look at it, I don't think it's a very different exercise from what we're currently trying to achieve on the road. Because the basics here is that you have a bunch of different hardware in terms of different drones that will serve a bunch of different use cases at a bunch of different locations. And from just what I heard coming in here, you're already trying to figure out what's right in front of you, what makes sense now, how do we solve this? There are all these technical discussions. I think my main point is, one, if you want the infrastructure part of this to scale commercially, you need the most boring thing of all, a standard. Two, once you have some sort of standard in place, which is really hard because I'm guessing there's like 4 standards here, and then now someone's going to say we need a new standard to marry everything, which means there's soon going to be 5 standards here. But apart from that, after that, you need to really take into the account the mind of the customer, because you're all experts. So I'm pretty sure you know everything there is to know about drones and then some. And it's extremely easy for the industry to go 4 steps ahead of the market. So for charging cars, this means that we're way into the energy markets and looking at flexibility and all sorts of things. Our customers don't care at all about that stuff. That's 5 years into the future. They care about charging their car today. So if you're somehow able to create a standard which enables commercial development of the market for the customers who are there today with a need that can be solved today, I think that's really the first iteration of where you're supposed to go. And I have no idea where you're going to end up, but if you can get to that first iteration, I think you're doing something right.
And I can relate to that, because if you look at the electric car, it's available in pretty much all industrialized markets today. But in Alabama, I see maybe 1 electric car a day. In Oslo, you see them everywhere, all the time. It's not because the product is not available in Alabama, it's just because the system around it, the infrastructure. And that makes something with the perception of us as consumers. I think we can talk to pretty much everybody in Norway, and they will say that even though they don't own an electric car, they would see it as pretty much equal as a gasoline or diesel car, because you have a neighbor that drives it or something else. In Alabama, electric car is really bad stuff. They don't have any experience with it. So, you know, from a consumer point of view, from Posten and Ruter, when you hear what he's saying, how can we kind of go forward to make sure that your consumers are asking for this as a service instead of this being something frightful new, which is they don't see the point of it?
Yep. from a Posten perspective, I think that I can certainly say that none of our customers has a drone requirement in itself. So they may have different delivery requirements, and maybe the drone is a useful tool for some of these. And I think that from our perspective, as of today, there are two primarily use cases. One is time-critical deliveries, example, health industry, biological samples to hospitals and so forth. And then there's also geographic areas with high cost to serve as today, or high complexity to serve. And we do have quite a lot of those locations in Norway. I think that both of these use cases will be perceived as valuable to the society. So I think you are on the right path of proceeding use cases like that at the beginning, both to get acceptance, but also to reduce risk also. These are areas with lower risk to start an operation with as well.
I think it's quite simple, actually. When we changed our vision from being a public transport company to the vision sustainable freedom to move, this is about the freedom to move. And you get closer to having the experience that you can move freely. It's like Scotty in Star Trek when he said, "Beam me up, Scotty," and you sort of, I think that's been a dream for any of us, that you can travel effortlessly, fast, and from where you are to where you want to go. The closer you can get to that experience, there's going to be a demand for it. But then, like I said, it has to happen in a sustainable way. But customers, if this market develops without regulation, and the customers really start seeing that these products are there and we want them, and the regulations are behind, it might not get sustainable. And that's the reason why we're so concerned about it and follows it very closely.
And that takes us to Sture from the Oslo municipality, that even though you don't regulate the drone sector in itself,
we don't.
but you're still kind of in charge of the Oslo city. You may also be a big customer in the future on a lot of services that the municipality provides. But again, at least the politicians of Oslo have to be the ones facing the inhabitants with their concerns or their pleasures of drones. How do you approach the field?
Yeah. Normally I like to keep my feet on the ground, but today I'm a little bit elevated and dizzy. I think, in Oslo, 55% of all emissions are actually coming from transport. So the thing we are trying to do is electrify everything, including, the maritime sector, autonomous ships, and so on. And why not drones? I think if there is an economic reason behind it, it will be there. But I'm not sure about the speed. So, of course, it have to be regulated. We don't want a lot of drones with sniffers on public buildings and so on. So we have to regulate it inside, let's say, a ring tree, as today. However, we see a lot of good use cases. Power lines were mentioned. Policing, police departments, obvious. But it's a little bit like autonomous vehicles. There probably has to be some sort of regulation. Even if I personally love technology, I see we can meet a certain point where we have to regulate this in one way or another. But it opens up vast potential for many sectors. And I hope Norway can be a player as we are in the maritime sector.
Just later today, we're going to get the kind of the results from the opinion polls and see what do Norwegians actually think about the drones. Are they eager to see them come into the market, or are they kind of worried about it? What does the municipality do to kind of introduce this softly to, because I would assume there are a lot of benefits where you can save costs or improve services, but if inhabitants don't like drones to start with, it doesn't help that we have 300 people here that really loves it if you have 500,000 people who said we're not going to use it anyway.
Yeah, a very good point. And I think what we can do is trying to educate. We are trying to put up a test together with hospitals in Oslo and the university. But I think we have to find the good cases, like if it's vital medicine out, using it for emergency purposes, defibrillators and so on, make some good cases that shows that this technology is not a problem, it could be a part of the solution.
Børre?
Yes, I think a very good way of introducing drones and UAV to the society and community is to have a very good and solid operational company doing this based on traditional aviation standards. Instead of having very young emerging companies with no aviation background, you can put in companies to operate the drones based on traditional aviation standard, and this will make a very good, let's say, very good platform for introducing the operation to the community in a safe way.
Yeah, for me, representing OSM Aviation, we look at, today we are manning planes, and we're also doing pilot training because you need more pilots. But also that's going to be part of what's going to make drones work. You need to have people operating them. Posten and Ruta, do you think that this is going to be an in-house operation for your case, or do you think it's going to be more of like the police? We heard earlier today that cops are still going to be cops. You need to have kind of operators on the side dealing with that so that the cops can still be doing their police work and not be everything.
Well, this is really hard to see how this future is going to develop. But I think if you follow the trends from elsewhere, you see a lot of shared resources. And I think, instead of everybody buying their own, system that might be proprietary, not talking very well to other systems and things like that, if you watch out now and see could we create more shared solutions? I think we both could get easier to our objectives because it might be fast that way. And it's for certain it's going to be more scalable than having a lot of uncoordinated initiatives. And I think by the end of the line, it's also going to be cheaper.
For Posten's part, I think that we will predominantly buy a drone as a service, but I think we need to find how can we integrate with that? How can we integrate the ground-based logistics with the air logistics? I think we have a role to play there, predominantly maybe also with our infrastructure. We're everywhere in Norway, so that could provide a center of landing and takeoff facilities. We have got over 300 locations with manned the space, we got the people and so forth. So there will be an integration, I think. Maybe some of our posties could do an loading, unloading of a drone, but the actual flight operation would be handled by service provider.
Turning to Brian and Jay, we've had several introductions with from you guys and from others with experience from the US. What's the success from FAA in kind of operating at the speed of, as a regulator operating at the speed of operators? And because I kind of got that idea, but then I'm also going to ask Brian afterwards, do you really feel like that from the industry side? But how do you get a big organization?
No, let you go first. You go first.
But everything is bigger in the US, and what I see is
the drones are the same size. So I think one of our successes has been using our existing regulatory framework and going back to the core safety principles. When we look at a Part 135 or air carrier certificate for an operator, it has a number of prescriptive requirements in there, many of which came from decades of experience building up manned aviation. The best example we use is the 135 certificate requires that the pilot carry the manuals on the aircraft. Well, with drone operations, there are two inherent problems with this. One, the pilot is not on the aircraft. And two, even if I could put it in electronic form, which I can, and put it on the aircraft, it doesn't meet the real safety intent. The real safety intent was give the pilot the information that you need. And what I've been hearing around here is you're actually taking very similar approaches. You haven't gotten quite as far as we have with our operators, but very similar approaches. And when you go back to those, what were the core safety tenets that I wanted to ensure? And then just adapt them. That gives you, within your current regulatory structure, the flexibility to find a solution while you get people up and operating, and understand how you want to change the rule well enough that you know that you won't limit the operations. I think that's the key to one of the things we've been doing. No amount of thinking about it in a room with government experts will come up with the solution. The solutions will come from flying and getting experience and seeing how it can be done.
Brian, do you feel that the FAA are as forward-leaning as the impression given here is?
I do, and I think you you hit on it in your opening remarks, Jay. That this is a very different way of regulating. It's more iterative. It's get out there, operationalize, but by the same token, the people that are doing package delivery today under the modified versions of Part 135 are aviators, right? UPS, they put together Flight Forward, but this is an organization that knows how to do package delivery. One of the things that this has been a fascinating discussion because we've talked about a lot of different things, including, how are the operators going to feel of buses when, we start to automate things like that. A couple points here that I think pertain directly to regulations. Number one, not everybody has to have their pizza delivered via drone. We've got sidewalk robots too, and in that world, those are heavily regulated at the municipal level, not at the federal level. And we have the same operators that are being permitted to fly 135 type operations now that are saying we don't want regulations at the municipal level. Thank you very much. We'll just have these things use bike lanes or sidewalks and things like that. And your pizza is much more likely to arrive hot that way. So there's that. For things like organ delivery, which is very time sensitive, that's already happening now in places like Baltimore and elsewhere. So that's a very different use case. The people that are involved in that are also people that are used to using helicopters and understand all of the different things. So I think I just make that point because this approach is very important because it's not one size fits all here. And some instances need to be regulated in different ways because the regulations need to be proportional to what the safety risks are. We've got very good data being collected in Rwanda by organizations that have been flying beyond visual line of sight and doing all kinds of medical supplies and other kinds of supplies in remote areas. And we can collect that data in places where there's almost zero risk if that aircraft comes down in an uncontrolled way, and then apply them in more challenging regulatory environments.
See, we already ran out of time. It's a lot of issues kind of on the table at the same time, but I think it gave us a good kind of holistic picture that the opportunities here are immense. We have public companies, private companies, we have regulators, and there are things happening domestically and abroad. We're probably kind of to advertise for UAS, organization like that is vital in making sure that we talk together and that we make sure that we also talk to the Department of Transportation, who makes the laws and regulations together with the Parliament, and Luftfartstilsynet, which helps oversee them and regulate them. And if you have one part of this chain express or speeding up, it doesn't really help for the whole market penetration because there are so many that are dependent on each other. We need the consumers to trust this. We need to have companies providing the services. We need to make sure that there are operators who can handle this. And the regulators have to be present to make sure that we just feel this is safe. If we go back 100 years, you would still experience a lot of elevators where you had people actually, taking that up and down. I don't think anybody today is hesitant about pushing the button yourself. If you don't trust the elevators, you wouldn't trust it with more people in it either. But for most of us, you trust the elevators. And I'm pretty sure that that's where we're going also with drones. But we have to find the useful areas. We have to find where the cost of operating them are kind of giving us a value compared with the services we provide. So even though we can transport pizza with drones, I do fully agree with you that maybe sometimes it's more a hassle than a benefit, that just having the pizza car is easier because of the cost and everything. But when it comes to for instance, blood that are more needs of high speed, or in rural areas when it comes to postal delivery, or in the future delivering us by drones certain places, not necessarily replacing the trains, but adding for the last mile, the opportunities here are a lot. And we also have to recognize that even though we have now talked a lot about flying drones, which is probably the interest of most of you, the autonomous vehicles on the road and on the ocean are also drones in this aspect. And when you have developments breaking through on some of those areas, it can benefit all the different sectors of the drone market. That's going to be my wrap-up remarks, having listened to you 7 guys. Thank you a lot for being part of this, and for UAS. Next time, remember there are also girls and women in this sector. Thank you. Thanks.